Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Friday, February 20th, 2026. And look, usually we like to ease into the weekend with something a little lighter, right?
Yeah, maybe a tech deep dive or, a history mystery.
Exactly. But if you have been anywhere near a news feed, a television, or frankly, just your family group chat today, you know we really cannot do that.
No, there's really only one story in the world today.
It is the only story. The breaking news is just massive. The Supreme Court has officially struck down the manner, and that word manner is going to do a lot of heavy lifting for us today, in which tariffs were imposed during the Trump administration.
Right.
And I've been, scrolling through social media looking at the headlines, and the immediate reaction is exactly what you'd expect. It's a scoreboard.
Oh, entirely. Who won? Who lost? Is this a knockout blow for the former president? Is it a victory for the Democrats?
Exactly. It's treated like a sporting event. But then I started digging into the stack of research you sent over earlier today.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, the heavy stuff, the legal proofs, the economic analysis, the trade reports. And I realized that the scoreboard take is incredibly shallow. This isn't just about politics.
It's noise. The signal, the thing we're here to really dig into, is much, much bigger than a political win or loss for one person or one party.
One of the phrases that jumped out at me from our source material was this idea of the skeleton of democracy. That gave me pause.
It's a striking image, right?
It is. Because usually we think of democracy as the flesh and blood, right? The voting, the yelling at town halls, the campaigning. But this ruling touches the bones.
That is the key phrase. And it connects to another massive dot we need to connect today, which is the operating system of globalization.
So we have a skeleton and an operating system. We're really mixing metaphors all over the place today.
We are going to have a biological and technological nightmare of metaphors by the end of this hour, but trust me, it works.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually we think of a court ruling as a purely domestic thing. It happens in a marble building in D.C., it affects U.S. law, and life goes on. Right. But the materials we are looking at today suggest this connects three huge, seemingly separate worlds.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
Right. One, a domestic constitutional crisis that was just averted. Two, an international system, specifically the World Trade Organization, that is essentially crumbling as we speak.
And three.
And three, the cold, hard economic reality of who actually pays when nations fight.
That is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to take this ruling, which feels like a legal speed bump, and show how it's actually a pivot point for the entire global economy.
I want to warn you, the listener, right now. Buckle up. Grab a coffee or maybe something stronger if it's that kind of Friday.
You might need it.
This is going to be a marathon session. We aren't doing the 5-minute recap. We are going deep because the sources we have today, from the legal breakdown of the ruling to the preview of the WTO conference come up in Cameroon, it's just too big for sound bites.
Absolutely. Because if you just read the headline, "Court Strikes Down Tariffs," you miss the most fascinating part. The court didn't say tariffs are illegal.
Right. That's the twist that I think a lot of people are completely missing. They didn't say, you can't tax imports.
Not at all. They said the way they were done was illegal. And that distinction explains why efficiency is not the highest virtue in a republic.
So let's start right there. The ruling itself, a question of process, not policy. I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
To the average person, process sounds like red tape. It sounds like bureaucracy. Why should anyone care how the tariffs were imposed as long as the policy got done?
To answer that, we have to go back to the source code, the Constitution. It is actually not subtle about this.
It's pretty black and white in the text, isn't it?
Very much so. Article 1, Section 7, quote, "All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives."
The power of the purse.
Exactly. The founders were very specific. They didn't want a king who could just demand money or tax trade on a whim because he needed to fund a war or, build a palace.
They wanted the People's Representatives Congress to hold that power. But wait, we've had presidents imposing tariffs for decades. This isn't the first time a president has slapped a tax on steel or aluminum.
No, it's not.
So how has that been happening if the Constitution says Congress has to do it?
That's where it gets interesting. Over the last century, Congress has passed laws like the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, specifically Section 232.
Okay.
These laws essentially say, okay, Mr. President, we are busy. We are going to lend you this power. You can impose tariffs, bid you, only under these specific conditions.
Like a national security emergency.
Exactly, like national security.
Okay, I like the analogy used in the analysis here. It calls it a borrowed tool.
Yes. Think of it like this. I lend you my lawnmower because your grass is getting long. You can use it to mow your lawn. That is the agreement.
Right. I mow my lawn, I bring it back.
But you can't sell the lawnmower. You can't paint it pink and call it yours. And you definitely can't use it to mow down the neighbor's flower bed just because you feel like it. It's still my lawnmower.
But let me push back on that analogy. If I lend you my lawnmower and you keep it in your garage for 4 years and you use it every single week,
Right.
at a certain point, doesn't it effectively feel like yours? Isn't possession 9/10 of the law?
In the neighborhood, maybe? In constitutional law, absolutely not.
No squatters' rights for presidential power.
Exactly. And that's the crux of what the administration got wrong here. They attempted to convert what was a conditional, bounded delegation of power into an inherent authority.
They acted as if the presidency itself had the power to tax trade.
Right. Regardless of what Congress had specified in the statutes, they treated the borrowed tool as their own permanent property.
So they took the lawnmower, painted it pink, and told Congress to get off their property.
Precisely. And the Supreme Court today effectively said, give us the lawnmower back.
Wow.
They ruled that when the executive stretches authority beyond the statutory limits set by Congress, when they treat a temporary loan of power as a permanent entitlement, the judiciary will intervene.
This brings us back to that phrase, the skeleton of democracy. Why does process matter so much? I mean, if the tariffs were popular with a certain base, or if the administration felt they were strictly necessary for the economy, isn't the result more important than the method?
This is the philosophical deep dive. In our modern world, we obsess over efficiency. We want things done fast. We want problems solved yesterday.
If there's a problem with steel imports, we want a tariff now.
We are an Amazon Prime culture.
We really are. Next day delivery for trade policy.
But the ruling creates a category mistake correction. The administration tried to short-circuit the deliberative machinery.
The machinery is supposed to be slow.
It is supposed to be deliberative, and that often means slow. The machinery is designed to prevent unilateralism. If you bypass Congress, you bypass the debate.
You bypass the consensus bit?
You bypass the checks, yes.
So legitimacy is more important than efficiency.
In a constitutional republic.
Yes.
Yes, always. Policy outcomes, whether taxes go up or down, whether we protect steel or not, those shift with every election. One president builds, the next tears down.
But process.
The rules of the game, that is what endures. That is the skeleton. If you break the skeleton, the body can't stand up, no matter how strong the muscles are.
That's a really powerful image. It's not just a procedural error. It's breaking the frame of the house.
Exactly. And that leads us to the strategic side of this, because what's baffling to a lot of political analysts, and this is heavily highlighted in our source material, is that this was a totally unforced error.
This is the part that drives political strategists completely crazy. Looking back at the time these tariffs were imposed, the party in power had unified control.
Right. They had the White House, they had the Senate, and they had the House of Representatives.
So they could have just passed a law.
They absolutely could have. If they wanted these tariffs, they could have written a bill, whipped the votes in Congress, and passed it. It would have been the law of the land.
So why didn't they? Why use the executive order route if you literally have the votes? Was it just laziness?
It's rarely just laziness in Washington. It's usually a calculation, even if it turns out to be a bad one. Two reasons stand out. One is a preference for speed.
Because legislation takes time.
Passing legislation is messy. You have to negotiate with committees. You have amendments. It takes months. You have to trade favors. An executive order takes a signature. It's instant gratification.
It looks stronger on TV, too.
Yeah.
The president sitting at the desk signing the document with a big pen.
Exactly. It projects action. It looks decisive. But the second reason is a misreading of institutional constraints. There's a temptation when you have power to test how far it stretches. But the source material uses a brilliant analogy here to explain why that fails. Sand versus bedrock.
Oh, I really like that one. Break that down for us.
Executive orders are sand. They are fast to build. You can pile up a sandcastle in an afternoon, but they are inherently fragile. The tide comes in, a court ruling or a new president taking office, and washes it away in seconds. Legislation, on the other hand, is bedrock.
It takes forever to drill into it.
It's hard work, it's noisy, it's frustrating, but once it's set, it supports a skyscraper. It's resilient.
So the administration built a massive global economic policy on sand when they had the drill rigs right there to build on bedrock.
And today, the tide came in. The Supreme Court ruling is the wave that washed the sandcastle away. And the profound tragedy for their supporters is that if they had done the hard work of legislation, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. The tariffs would likely still be standing.
That is the ultimate irony. This shortcut turned out to be the dead end.
Yeah.
And this reinforces the idea of the separation of powers as shock absorbers. I think that's another great visual from our notes.
It is. Imagine a car speeding down a bumpy road. The car is the government. The engine, the executive branch, wants to go 100 miles per hour. It wants to get to the destination right now.
But if you hit a bump at that speed without suspension, the car flies off the road.
Exactly. The judiciary and the legislature are the suspension. When one branch accelerates too fast, the others provide resistance. They compress. They absorb the energy to stabilize the vehicle.
So today, the Supreme Court didn't act as a political enemy.
Not at all. They acted as a constitutional referee. They said, you are redlining the engine, and you're going to crash the car.
What's fascinating is how this domestic decision, something based on a 200-year-old document, plays out on the world stage. Because usually when a leader gets blocked by their own courts, it looks weak.
Right, the optics seem bad.
You'd think foreign leaders in Beijing or Moscow would look at this and see chaos. Like, oh, the U.S. president can't even deliver on his own trade policy.
You might think that. And certainly in the short term, it creates confusion in the markets. We saw the stock tickers going crazy today. But paradoxically, being bound by internal laws actually increases U.S. credibility globally over the long term.
How so? That feels really counterintuitive.
Because it signals that the rule of law still matters here. If the President of the United States can be told no by a court, it means the system actually works. It means contracts matter. It means statutes matter.
It's predictable.
Yes. It signals that even during a period of intense economic nationalism, the U.S. isn't just a dictatorship of one person's whims. We adhere to our own rules.
That's a crucial point. It distinguishes the U.S. from authoritarian regimes, where the leader's word is the law, period. If you sign a deal with a dictator, it's only good as long as he's happy.
Right. But if you sign a deal with a constitutional republic,
you know that there are checks and balances that might be frustrating, but they provide a baseline of stability. You know that the law is not just a tool of the ruler.
Exactly.
And looking forward, the ramifications are huge. If the court is willing to strike this down, is this the start of a broader re-examination of executive overreach?
It has to be. Look at immigration. Look at emergency powers. This ruling puts everyone on notice. The borrowed tool metaphor applies everywhere now. If Congress lent you the power, use it exactly as instructed or give it back.
So we've had this earthquake in Washington. The Supreme Court has spoken. The sandcastle has been washed away. But the vibrations are traveling way beyond the Beltway.
They are.
They are heading across the Atlantic, down to Africa, to a conference room in Cameroon.
This is the global context. The ruling reverberates, but the global system itself, the place where trade rules are actually supposed to live, is crumbling.
Let's talk about the World Trade Organization.
The WTO.
Even saying it sounds dusty. It sounds like a room full of people in gray suits reading binders.
I mean, it is a room full of people in gray suits reading binders, but it's important, and it's in deep, deep trouble. The source notes mention the upcoming 14th Ministerial Conference in Yaoundé, Cameroon. That's happening just next month, March 26th to 29th, 2026.
And the setting for this conference is pretty grim, according to our analysis. It seems like the mood is strained.
Strained is putting it mildly. We have to look at the old wiring problem. The WTO was born in 1995.
1995. I was wearing flannel. I was listening to Hootie and the Blowfish. The internet was barely a thing. It was a rumor for most people.
Exactly. The world of 1995 was a world of container ships, tariff schedules, and industrial disputes about steel and corn. It was physical stuff moving across physical borders.
In today.
Today, the economy is data flows, it's AI models crossing borders, it's green supply chains, it's geopolitical fault lines between superpowers, it's intangible assets.
So the analogy is...
we're trying to run cloud computing on a dial-up modem. The WTO is the dial-up modem. It's screeching, it's slow, and it simply can't handle the bandwidth of the modern economy. And when the system lags, people get angry.
Our sources break down the stress fractures of the WTO pretty specifically. There are 5 of them, and I think we need to go through these because they explain why this system is paralyzed. Yeah. It's not just regular bureaucracy, it's structural failure.
Right. Let's look at number 1, which is arguably the biggest. A paralyzed dispute system.
This is the appellate body, right?
Yes. Think of it as the Supreme Court for global trade.
Okay.
If country A cheats country B, say, puts an illegal tax on bananas, country B complains to the WTO. A panel hears it. If country A doesn't like the ruling, they appeal to the appellate body. That body makes the final binding ruling.
Sounds reasonable. That's how courts work.
But it's been non-functional since 2019.
Wait, 2019, why? Did they run out of funding?
No. The U.S. blocked the appointment of new judges.
The U.S. Why would we break the global court?
This is where the nuance really comes in. The U.S., and this spans multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat, so it's a bipartisan stance, felt that the judges were legislating from the bench.
Oh, I see.
They felt the appellate body was interpreting rules in ways that the U.S. never agreed to, specifically regarding how we calculate dumping and subsidies. So the U.S. said, we aren't approving any new judges until you fix this.
And the rest of the world said no, so the U.S. said fine, no judges.
Exactly. So right now, if you lose a case at the WTO, you can essentially appeal into the void. Appeal into the void. That's a great phrase.
You file an appeal, and because there are no judges to hear it, the case just sits there forever in limbo. The enforcement mechanism is entirely dead. The rules are becoming just suggestions because there is no final court to enforce them.
That sounds chaotic. It's like playing a football game where the referee has no whistle. People are just going to start fouling each other.
Exactly.
Okay, fracture number 2. Consensus as gridlock.
This is a fundamental design flaw.
Yeah.
The WTO has 166 members. To pass any major rule, all 166 have to agree.
Unanimously.
Unanimously.
That seems impossible. I can't get 5 friends to agree on a pizza topping. If one person wants pineapple and the other hates it, we starve.
That is the perfect analogy. Imagine trying to choreograph a ballet where every single dancer, from the prima ballerina to the person in the very back row, insists on leading the dance.
Total collision.
If one person says no, the dance stops. That is the WTO right now. You have huge economies like the U.S. and tiny island nations, and they all have an equal veto. Fracture number 3, development tensions. This seems to be the fight over who gets to be called a developing country.
Right. The WTO has this concept of special and differential treatment, S&DT.
What does that actually do?
Basically, if you are a developing country, you get cut some slack. You can have higher tariffs to protect your young industries. You get more time to implement complex rules. You get subsidies to help you catch up.
Which makes sense for a small, struggling economy. You give handicap to the new player.
It does. But here's the friction. China claims developing country status.
China, the second largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
The country with the space station.
Exactly. And the U.S. and Europe look at that and say, hold on. You are a manufacturing superpower. You have a space program. You are leading the world in EV production. You are not a developing nation in the same way that, say, Chad or Bangladesh is.
But China says, hey, per capita, we are still poor.
Right. They point to their rural poverty and their per capita GDP. But this conflict over definitions is tearing the room apart. The U.S. refuses to write new rules if China gets to play by the easy mode rules.
Fracture number 4. Transparency deficits. This is about hiding what you're actually doing, right?
Specifically regarding subsidies, if a government is quietly pouring billions of dollars into its own energy companies or manufacturing plants to give them an unfair advantage globally, that destroys trust.
It's like playing poker with someone who has an ace up their sleeve.
Worse, it's like playing poker with someone who is printing their own chips under the table.
Man.
But right now, the reporting is opaque. It's hard to prove who is subsidizing what. It's the geopolitical sunlight problem. We simply don't have enough of it.
And finally, fracture number 5, new frontiers.
This goes right back to the dial-up modem. Digital trade, climate-linked tariffs. How do you tax a digital file? If I stream a movie from a server in France, is that an import?
I have no idea.
The WTO doesn't really know either. And climate change. How do you punish a country for having a dirty supply chain if the rules were written before climate change was even a major policy priority? These things just don't fit the old rule book.
So to recap the state of this institution, we have a broken court, total gridlock, fights over who is developing, secret subsidies, and wildly outdated rules. It sounds like the House just needs to be condemned.
Or retrofitted. And that brings us to the reform blueprint. Because nobody wants to blow it up completely.
Really? Why not? If it's this broken, why not start over from scratch?
Because a world with absolutely no trade rules is the Wild West. That's bad for everyone. If every country just does whatever they want, costs skyrocket, supply chains break, and you might end up in actual shooting wars over resources and access. So the conversation in Cameroon is going to be about the how-to, how to fix it without breaking it.
One of the proposed solutions in our sources is moving from unanimity to Plurilateral agreements. What is that?
Yeah. This is the coalition of the willing approach. Instead of waiting for all 166 countries to agree on that pizza topping, you get a group, say, 50 countries who really care about digital trade. They make a deal among themselves.
Pros and cons.
Pros, you actually get things done. You can move fast on specific modern issues. Cons, you risk fracturing the global system into competing blocks. You get a fragmented world where there's one set of rules for this club and another set for that club.
We have three main players heading to Cameroon with three very different visions for the future. The big three. I want to play this out. If each of these players got to design the world, what would it look like?
Let's do it. The clash of visions.
First up, the European Union. What is the EU's dream world?
The EU loves structure. Their vision is called structured evolution. Think of the EU as the architect.
The architect, okay.
They want a clear roadmap. They want predictability. They want to fix the court, keep the rules, but make them flexible enough to work. They believe that if you just write enough intelligent regulations, you can solve any problem. In the EU's world, everything is codified, everything is fair, and everything takes a very long time to decide.
Okay, so a very orderly, bureaucratic utopia. Then we have the United States. What is the U.S. vision right now?
The U.S. is the skeptic. Their vision is pragmatic coalitions. They are very skeptical of full multilateralism right now. They look at the 166 members and say, this isn't working. Their attitude is, if the full orchestra can't play in tune, let's break off into a jazz quartet.
The jazz musician approach. I like that.
Exactly. Let's get the like-minded countries, the democracies, the market economies together and make a deal. If China doesn't want to join, fine. We'll do it without them. The U.S. prioritizes fast results over universal inclusion.
And finally, China. What does China want out of this conference?
China is the defender. Their vision is development-centered multilateralism. They are playing a very long game. They want to defend the status quo where they are considered a developing nation. They love the most favored nation status, which basically says everyone gets treated the same because that prevents the West from legally ganging up on them.
So they want to keep the rules exactly as they are,
right?
Because they are winning under the current rules.
Pretty much. They want to keep the global system open to their massive exports, but ensure it continues to serve their domestic development goals. They see the U.S. attempts to change the rules as a thinly veiled way to contain China's rise.
So you have the architect, the EU, trying to renovate the house. You have the jazz musician, the U.S., trying to leave the house and just play in the garage with a few friends. And the defender, China, insisting the house is fine, actually don't touch anything.
That is the dynamic. And the central dilemma is this. How do you be flexible enough to satisfy the U.S. without being so flexible that the system completely breaks? And how do you be inclusive enough for China without letting the rules become totally meaningless?
The stakes in Cameroon are incredibly high. It feels like a massive fork in the road for the planet.
It is. A successful conference could be a spring for the WTO, a sign of life, a path forward, a failure. It's a drift towards severe fragmentation, a world where trade becomes a weapon, not a tool.
Okay, we've talked about the high courts in D.C. and the international conferences in Africa, but I want to bring this down to earth. I want to talk about money.
The bottom line.
Yes. Because while the diplomats are arguing in Cameroon over plurilateral agreements, regular people are at the grocery store staring at the price of avocados and wondering how they're going to pay for them.
This is the economic reality check.
Yeah.
And this is the part that hits the wallet directly.
We need to talk about the hidden tax. Because for years, the rhetoric has been, we are putting tariffs on foreign countries. We are making them pay. You hear politicians say this all the time. China is paying us billions.
And that is unequivocally economically false. It is a myth.
Let's debunk it. Walk us through the actual transaction of a tariff.
Okay. Let's say the U.S. government puts a 20% tariff on imported steel, or, say, imported sneakers. Does the government of China or Vietnam write a check to the U.S. Treasury? No, they don't pay a dime.
So who writes the check?
The U.S. importer, the company bringing the goods into the country. So a company like Nike or Ford or Walmart, they pay the tax to U.S. Customs at the border.
And what did that company do? Did they just eat that cost out of the goodness of their hearts?
Well, they aren't a charity. They have margins to maintain. They have shareholders to answer to. So they pass that cost on to the retailer.
Yeah.
And the retailer passes it on to
you,
the consumer. Tariffs are effectively a broad-based sales tax. But they are a hidden sales tax because it's baked into the price on the sticker. You don't see it on the receipt at the register. You just see that sneakers used to be $80 and now they are $100.
Now, I've heard people argue, well, companies absorb some of it to stay competitive, or it forces companies to manufacture in the U.S., which creates jobs here. What does the data say?
Sometimes companies absorb a little bit, sure, but study after study from the last decade shows the vast majority of the cost is passed straight to the consumer. And as for manufacturing coming back, it's slow, it's very expensive, and often it just means buying from a different foreign country that isn't taxed, say, moving a factory from China to Vietnam, rather than making it in Ohio.
Our analysis points out that this is a regressive tax. Can we explain that term? Because it sounds technical, but the impact is really human.
It is crucial to understand. Regressive means it hurts the poor more than the rich.
Give me an example of how that works in real life.
Okay. Think about a microwave. Let's say a tariff adds $20 to the price of a microwave. If you are a millionaire, that $20 is a rounding error. You drop that on a coffee and a scone at the airport, you don't even notice it.
Right. It doesn't change your week.
But if you are a single mom making minimum wage or a retiree living on a fixed income, that $20 is a significant chunk of your weekly grocery budget. Low-income families spend a much higher percentage of their income on physical goods, clothes, food, appliances. Those are exactly the things that get hit by tariffs.
So the tariff policy is basically sending a bill to the people who can least afford to pay it.
Exactly. And the source material calls it a fiscal seesaw.
I saw that in the notes. What does that mean, the fiscal seesaw?
Think about the broad policy mix we've seen in recent years. On one end of the seesaw, you have tax cuts that largely benefit corporations and high earners. Capital gains cuts, corporate rate cuts.
Okay, so the wealthy get a break on their taxes.
And on the other end of the seesaw, you have tariffs, which, as we just established, are consumption taxes that heavily hit the working class. It's a wealth transfer. You are effectively taking money from the many through higher prices at places like Walmart and giving it to the few through tax cuts. It is an engine for inequality.
That is incredibly stark. When you put it that way, it feels less like trade policy and more like class warfare.
Economists would argue it certainly has that effect, yes. And there's collateral damage, too. Tariffs are blunt instruments.
Right. They don't just hit the perceived bad guys.
No. Imagine a small country, let's say a budding democracy in Africa or Southeast Asia, that relies heavily on exporting textiles to the U.S. They are an ally. They are trying to grow their middle class. Suddenly, a blanket tariff hits. They lose access to the U.S. market overnight. Factories close. Livelihoods are completely destroyed.
So we are potentially destabilizing friendly, struggling nations almost by accident.
Or by indifference.
Yeah.
Policy indifference. The moral aspect is real. We are crushing economies that are barely hanging on, all to pursue a domestic policy that isn't even working as advertised back home.
But we have to be fair here. I want to pause and acknowledge something important from the materials.
Yeah.
The political appeal of tariffs didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't just a magic trick that duped everybody. There was a diagnosis of a real problem.
Absolutely, and we cannot dismiss that. The political misdiagnosis is a key part of this whole story.
The pain is real.
The pain is incredibly real. Go to the Rust Belt. Go to the hollowed-out towns where the factory closed 20 years ago. The opioid crisis, the stagnation of wages, the loss of dignity, that is not a fiction. People saw their communities literally crumble while Wall Street got richer than ever.
So when a politician comes along and says, bad trade deals did this to you, foreigners stole your job, tariffs will fix it, people listen.
They listen because it acknowledges their reality. It validates their very justified anger. But the economic analysis here suggests that while the pain is real, the culprit was misidentified.
The mistake was blaming trade entirely.
The reality is that trade created immense wealth for the United States overall. Efficiency went up, prices came down, we got much richer as a nation. But the wealth wasn't shared. That's the key insight. The problem isn't that wealth wasn't created, it's that it accrued almost entirely to the top tier. Corporate profits skyrocketed, executive pay skyrocketed, worker wages stagnated.
So the villain wasn't the container ship coming from China. The villain was the internal distribution of the gains.
Exactly. And automation played a huge role, too. Robots took far more jobs than overseas workers did. But you can't put a tariff on a robot, so politicians blame trade. But tariffs don't fix inequality. They exacerbate costs for the struggling class. It's like treating a broken leg with chemotherapy. You are attacking the entire system. You are making the patient feel incredibly sick, but you aren't fixing the break.
That is a brutal analogy, but it makes the point perfectly. So where does this leave us? This leads us into the final stretch of our discussion, the path forward. Because the Supreme Court just took away the method of the tariffs, the executive order, and the economics suggest the logic was flawed anyway, so what now? There's a huge vacuum.
There is a massive vacuum, and historically, vacuums are dangerous.
Yeah.
If you don't fill it with a better idea, the old bad idea just comes back.
Our source material points out a huge political failure of the opposition.
This is a harsh truth for the critics of tariffs. They failed to articulate an alternative. They let the protectionist narrative win because they didn't address the lived experience of economic anxiety.
They came with charts and graphs when people needed empathy and real solutions.
Exactly. Technocratic abstractions, things like aggregated efficiency gains, they don't win votes. If you tell a guy who just lost his factory job, well, actually, the country's GDP is up 3%, he's going to hate you. And frankly, he should, because that 3% didn't help him feed his kids.
So what is the new architecture? How do we move from blunt force to smart policy?
It has to be a two-pronged approach, domestic and global. You can't fix one without the other.
Let's start at home. If tariffs are the wrong tool for inequality, what is the right tool?
Domestically, you have to attack inequality directly. Address income and wealth disparity at the root.
Place-based economic revitalization. I love that term from the nose. What does it actually look like?
It means you don't just help people in the abstract, you help places. You invest in the specific towns that were left behind. You provide broadband, infrastructure, real job training for the jobs of tomorrow. You strengthen labor markets. You give workers power to negotiate again. You fix the internal distribution mechanism so that when global trade creates wealth, the worker actually sees it in their paycheck.
It's about fixing the plumbing of the economy so the water actually gets to everyone's house, not just the mansion on the hill.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And globally, the era of unilateralism has to end. The operating system metaphor comes back here.
The WTO is the OS.
Right. When your computer's operating system is glitching, you don't smash the computer with a hammer. You update the software. Reform is the difference between adaptation and obsolescence.
We need to rewrite the rules with our partners, not against them.
Cooperation over unilateralism. It sounds soft cooperation, but it's actually the hardest, most necessary work. We need to build a system that handles digital trade, that handles climate change, and that creates a genuine level playing field. But we can't dictate it alone. The world is too big now. We need the EU, we need the emerging markets, we need to build a coalition that is so big, everyone else has to play by the rules.
It's amazing how this all connects. We started with a Supreme Court ruling about congressional procedure, a lawnmower analogy, and we've ended up discussing the fundamental social contract of the global economy.
It really is all one story. The legal ruling was a check on power, the economic reality is a check on logic, and the global situation is a check on arrogance.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's synthesize this journey we've been on.
We went from a courtroom in D.C. where the justices said follow the rules, to a conference hall in Cameroon where diplomats are desperately trying to figure out what the rules even are anymore, to the wallet of the average American consumer who just wants to be able to afford the week's groceries without feeling squeezed.
The ruling was a speed bump for executive power.
But it's also a chance to reset the GPS. It's an opportunity to stop driving off-road and get back on the highway, but maybe drive a little smarter this time.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought built on our notes today. It's about the crossroads we are standing at right now.
Yes. The source material strongly suggests we are choosing between a power-based world and a rules-based world.
What's the fundamental difference?
A power-based world is might makes right. The big countries do whatever they want, the small countries suffer, and stability is basically zero. It's the law of the jungle.
And a rules-based world.
A rules-based world is frustrating. It's slow, it involves lawyers and endless conferences in Cameroon and difficult compromises. But it's predictable. It prevents wars, it allows for long-term planning and shared prosperity.
So the question for you to mull over this weekend is this. If the Supreme Court says the president can't go it alone, and the global economy is too complex for any one nation to dictate the terms, are we forced, finally, to admit that cooperation is the only selfishly smart move left?
Is being a good neighbor the only way to actually keep your own house safe? I think that's the defining question of the decade.
A huge thank you to the experts and analysts whose work fueled this deep dive today. This was a heavy one, but I think a really important one.
Keep questioning the process.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.